of more than just ourselves. It changes the name of the game. It changes how we look at things. And it changes our decision-making process. So, and we actually do this, but I don't think we notice we do it. I think we almost at lightning speed think of ourselves and then go through all these layers and back to ourselves and back to ourselves, and we're constantly trying to figure out, what's best for those around us. And then we say, yeah, but that might not be best for me. So how am I now going to make it best for me and them? And sometimes there's no good answer to that because there is maybe not a way to do something in a way that's best for a larger group and yourself. So then you're faced with this decision of, well, who am I going to pay most attention to? And honestly, most people on this planet are going to drop right back to level number one and say, I'm going to take care of myself first before, and hopefully what I do for myself will be of some benefit to someone else. But if it's not, well, yes, I'm just not going to think about that right now. These are unconscious things that we do, unconscious decisions that we make. And when we become aware of them, I think it gives us more choice. Because I do believe that there are decisions to be made about what we're going to do in this thing we call a lifetime, and make a decision about what are we going to use this life for? Are we going to simply use it to bring ourselves the most pleasure, the most positive experiences, whatever that might be for anyone? I mean, that's another thing to consider. Another thing to notice is that not everybody thinks the same thing as what everyone else wants. I mean, some people want to live in a mansion with 10 fancy cars outside and a trophy wife or husband and fame and fortune, and other people want to live in the woods in a cabin with a garden and be quite happy. So even the idea of what is best for us is different from one person to the other. But we don't tend to think about that much. We just sort of we live our lives. And we follow what it is that is the next thing that... It's amazing that most of the time we're running towards pleasure and we're running away from suffering. I mean, we're actually in the act of doing that at every moment of our existence. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way humans are wired. But I think it is useful to, again, notice that we do that and decide whether we want to keep bouncing off the walls of pleasure and pain, and maybe consider different ways to act or react or to work with others so that we're walking a more stable path that isn't drawing us, just pulling on us from one thing to the next. I think the way we do that is we have to get a higher and higher viewpoint of what is best. And that means we have to include others. Because others can make us miserable if we're not taking them into consideration. If we do something and it's not beneficial to those around us, then all of a sudden they're not happy with us. We've sort of stirred the pot. We've hit the hornet's nest, if you will. So the more that we can be conscious of living on larger and larger or broader and broader levels of awareness, the more our lives will be more even-keeled. The least control we have and the least peace we're going to find is when we're constantly trying to just deal with ourselves. Because we can't be happy in this world alone. We butt heads with too many people, too many ideas, too many things are out there that just don't fit our worldview. And so now we're fighting with everything, and we're arguing with everything, and we're trying to convince people, we're trying to create this safe zone around us of people and ideas and concepts that are okay with us. And when someone enters into that zone that is in opposition to that, we start to fight with them or push them away or tell them they're wrong. We're trying to keep this comfort zone around us. And we're trying to move through the world in this comfort zone that is imaginary. The more we include others, the more we compromise and say that I'm going to look for the thing that's of most benefit to the most people around me, at whatever level we decide is appropriate at that moment, the more harmonious we're going to be with our surroundings. So this idea of levels of awareness has to do with thinking less and less about our own personal sense of self and more about sort of the common good that will allow us to have a larger area of comfort and understanding by making compromises with things that we might not completely agree with. And that, on one sense, that is almost insulting to our individual self. It's like, you mean I have to give up something that I really think is important because it may not be what the next person wants? No. You have the choice of doing whatever you want. In Buddhism, all of the teachings are about one simple thing. What will cause me the least amount of suffering? You know? And in Buddhism, we're taught not to judge things. We're not taught to accept or reject things. We're simply given this litmus test of, does this or that, whatever it is, cause me suffering? And what can I do to reduce the suffering in my life? Now that's individual, because different things cause suffering for different people. And I'm not suggesting that we take any cause that we feel strongly about and say, well, I'm going to give up that cause because it makes others uncomfortable. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is there are things that we can do, still keeping our principles, still keeping our major choices, still keeping in alignment with the things that we think are important. But there are always ways to modify our interaction with others that makes the circle of harmonious circle larger and larger. We all have known people in our lives who jump at the chance to have an argument or a fight. It's like, just say anything and they will take the opposite, just to have that conversation. And I think we all do that to some degree. I think, because we have an opinion about everything, of course we do. I mean, how many things can you think of in your mind right now that you have no opinion of? There may be one or two, but most people, when they really get down to it, they have a feeling about one thing or another. And if someone comes up who has a strong feeling about something that you don't particularly like, you're going to want to tell them that they're not exactly right. But what you're really telling them is that that's not right for you. A minor thing, but the idea that we are so much more than this individual self, and that we have the ability to view things from different layers of awareness allows us to be more inclusive and allows us to be more accepting of the things that may bother us but aren't important. And I'm trying to head towards a finale here where I can talk about this guided meditation, so bear with me a minute, because I'm trying to make a point that I'm having a hard time making a point of. It's kind of like if you were going to climb a mountain and you started out at the bottom of the mountain and you were to draw a 10-foot red circle around yourself, and you're standing there before you starting your climb, and you think about, this is my space, this is where I am, This is, this is what I'm comfortable with. It's in that range of here I am. This is me. Now, when you start climbing the mountain, up the trail that's going to zigzag up the mountain, every time you come to a hairpin turn and look back down at where you were, that circle gets smaller and smaller and very quickly becomes less and less important. Because you've climbed a little higher, you can see a little farther. You start to understand a little bit more about what's going on as you're going up. And when you get to the top of the mountain, you can see for very long distances. You start to understand the geography of where you are. You start to see other mountains and valleys, and you start to see towns in the distance, and you see all kinds of things. But from that vantage point of the top of the mountain, if you look back down to where you were, this little tiny red spot at the very bottom of the mountain, that no longer has any meaning to you at all. It's not you anymore.